The champagne flutes caught the light like blades, all raised as your brother stood at the mic, soaking in applause as if he'd conquered something real. You were seated 3 rows from the head table, your name misplaced on purpose, your role in this spectacle reduced to an afterthought. He smiled at the crowd with that rehearsed charisma, then looked directly at you as he delivered the line that gutted the air. "You know," he said, his voice rich with mock sincerity, "my little brother always dreamed big, until reality handed him a mirror." They laughed, polite at first, then genuinely. You kept your expression still. He thought you had no teeth left to bite. They thought you were finished after the failed acquisition, the one they rigged behind closed doors and blamed on your name. Your silence was currency. You'd let them spend it. The ballroom was pristine, marble floors gleaming like liquid night, gold trim arching across high domes like it guarded secrets. Waitstaff moved like shadows. Your brother stood tall, draped in a Tom Ford tux, basking in his own mythology, and beside him, the bride, a woman with glacier eyes, did not laugh, not even a smile. You knew she wouldn't. The betrayal began long before this. The night your deal with Armitage Biotech died in a conference room double-booked on purpose. The NDA was printed in courier font, unsigned. You walked out while the board celebrated your downfall with cocktails on the roof. He toasted you that night too. But now, in front of ambassadors, shareholders, and 2 hedge fund moguls who once called you future royalty, he told the world you were nothing more than an ambition he stepped over. He always talked about legacy, your brother chuckled. But sometimes the family name just doesn't travel well. They clapped again, the kind of applause that seals coffins, and that's when the mic hummed. A whisper of static, almost imperceptible threading, through the speakers like a live wire waiting to strike. The room didn't notice, but she did. The bride turned her head, just a fraction, like she'd heard a warning only she could decode. You stood, slow, steady, not to leave, just to see his eyes when it began. Because the signal came through. Buried. In the hotel's audio channel, a hidden file injected through the DJ's line-in. Silent, but active. Across the world, servers lit up. The holding company your brother had quietly absorbed last quarter, a Sierra Group, received a 0-day exploit. The system admin, a mercenary you hired 2 years ago, opened the door with a single line of Python. The why. Reception continued. A string quartet played something untraceable. Hors d'oeuvres with names too expensive to pronounce floated by. They thought it was a wedding, but it was war. 3 tables over, Randall Cho of the Faraday Fund checked his phone, brows tightening. Asira's share tracker plummeted 4% in under a minute. Something was off. Something was bleeding. Your brother didn't notice. He was too busy delivering a closing punchline about how family is like equity. You divest when it stops. Performing. More laughter. A clink of glasses. Then the bride moved, not fast, just deliberate. She stepped up beside him, one manicured hand brushing his arm, the other lifting the mic. "May I?" she said, and he smiled, arrogant, proud, thinking it was part of the script. He didn't see the flicker in her gaze. You did. You always did. She took the mic like it weighed something real, not just polished metal, and with one breath, she rewrote the rhythm of the night. Her voice was smooth but cold, slicing through the air like a scalpel in an operating room filled with anesthetized gods. The room hadn't gone silent yet, but the silence was coming. "I wasn't supposed to say anything," she began, her eyes locked on no one and everyone. "But since we're speaking of legacy..." A ripple of confusion moved through the guests like heat distortion. Your brother laughed again, awkwardly this time, and reached for her hand. She let it fall. He blinked, his instincts twitching too late. You watched the exact moment the predator in him recognized a sharper weapon. They thought she was an acquisition, an ornament, a merger in a white dress. But you knew better. 2 years ago, you met her at a summit in Davos, her badge tagged with a dead firm's name, her drink untouched. She said 5 words to you that night. He's building his coffin early. You remembered them because she disappeared before dessert, and her card led to a law office that didn't exist. But by then, the signal had already begun. The room was still clapping, hesitant now, unsure of the script. I was 19 when I watched my father die under an alias he never chose, she said, and this time it echoed. The man who took him down built empires by stealing other people's futures. He even had the audacity to marry into one. They didn't understand yet. They thought it was metaphor, theater, a bride's weird wedding moment. Then came the first phone vibration. A CFO from Lennox Partners stood, pale, staring into his screen. A New York Post headline bloomed like blood. Asira data leak, SEC launches, midnight raid. The room didn't go silent. It died. And that's when your brother reached for the mic, only to find it wasn't just the bride holding it. It was you, your signal, your infrastructure, routed through 8 layers of burner, accounts and dead corporations. The feed was untraceable, the payload active. They thought it was just a toast. But the mic had been jacked into the event system since the morning. A hidden protocol. Whenever someone spoke more than 15 seconds, the stream began. Recorded, converted, and broadcast through a private subnet connected to 3 regulatory agencies and 2 media watchdogs. You knew they'd dig in by the time dessert was served, and now they were digging faster than you'd predicted. Across the venue, suits abandoned their soufflés, phones lit like emergency flares. Asira's fall was no longer a trickle. It was an avalanche. You could see it in Randall Cho's jaw as he mouthed, "Pull out." See it in Claudia Meller's shiver as she calculated how many of her personal assets were bundled in Asira's shell companies. The bride kept speaking, her voice a razor's edge. "This isn't love. This is restitution." You almost admired her timing. The screen behind the couple, the one meant for a slideshow of romantic nonsense, flickered once, then again. Then resolved into the Asira Holdings offshore structure, a cascading family tree of fraud, complete with your brother's login credentials in the top right corner. A soft gasp swept through the crowd. The bride dropped the mic. You heard it land like thunder. The signal came through again. Not here, but in Singapore, where a financial task force executed an asset freeze on an account holding $92 million under the name Elias Varkas, your brother's third alias. You'd found it a year ago but waited. Always wait. They never suspect, the quiet ones. And now the paper trail was alive and breathing. You turned just as your brother's face unraveled, rage melting into confusion. Then into something colder. Fear. Pure. Uncut. He didn't look at the bride. He looked at you. Because he finally understood. The night he humiliated you was never about the past. It was bait. A trigger for something already in motion. You hadn't come to make peace. You came to watch the fire. The ballroom lights dimmed for a moment. Not dramatic. Just technical. But it felt like the building itself exhaled, readying for collapse. They thought they could erase you. But tonight, you erased them first. She walked, away from the mic with the poise of a queen stepping off a battlefield, not a bride retreating to her table. The hem of her gown slid over the marble like fog, trailing quiet ruin in its wake. Behind her, your brother stood frozen, hands slightly raised, mouth part open, as if still waiting for the applause that would never come. They thought she was his, but she'd always been yours. Not in romance, in reckoning. You met her on a dead channel in a forum reserved for compliance leaks, back when she used the pseudonym Wraith Sigma. She had access to preliminary boardroom recordings from Asira's silent acquisition trail, deals your brother buried in NDAs and fake shell partnerships. She uploaded one file, just one, labeled Toast Draft Conf Room 37 and that MP4. You didn't need to press play, you already knew what it was. The night he and 3 board members laughed over a glass of Pappy Van Winkle, scripting your downfall line by line. Your brother even rehearsed the part where he'd tell you over dinner,